The Overmind drifted through the cosmos, its vast consciousness spreading across galaxies like a spider's web of pure energy. For billions of years, it had watched, learned, and catalogued every form of life it encountered. From single-cell organisms to mighty civilizations that spanned multiple star systems, the Overmind knew them all. It had predicted the fall of the crystal beings of Proxima Centauri 3 million years before they shattered themselves in a civil war. It had foreseen the rise of the gas giants' floating cities 10,000 years before they first took shape. The Overmind took pride in knowing everything there was to know about life and its patterns. Another solar system, the Overmind thought as it extended its awareness toward a yellow star. Class G2V, 8 planets, 1 habitable world. It had seen millions like this before. The third planet caught its attention. Blue, green, and wrapped in white clouds. Life was abundant there, but that wasn't unusual. The Overmind had documented life on millions of worlds. As it began its standard observation protocol, the Overmind noticed something different. The planet's surface was dotted with artificial lights, visible from space. Another technological species, it thought, preparing to add another predictable entry to its vast database. The Overmind focused its sensors on the dominant species, bipedal primates who called themselves humans. It watched their cities, their machines, their conflicts, and their achievements. According to its calculations, they were at development stage 7.3, the early space exploration phase. The Overmind had seen this phase 47,293 times before. They will follow the standard pattern, the Overmind concluded. Within 200 years, they will either destroy themselves or achieve stable interplanetary civilization. There is an 82.7% chance they will choose the path of self-destruction based on previous observations. But as the Overmind continued watching, small anomalies began appearing in its data. These humans were doing things differently. They were inefficient, illogical, and often worked against their own best interests. Yet somehow, they kept moving forward. The Overmind watched a human scientist work on a problem. According to its vast knowledge, the scientist was approaching it all wrong. The solution required careful, logical steps following established patterns. Instead, the human made random jumps in logic, followed hunches, and somehow arrived at a solution the Overmind hadn't predicted. This was irregular. The Overmind expanded its observation, watching more humans at work. A writer created stories about impossible things, and millions of humans read them, using these impossible ideas to inspire real inventions. Artists made patterns that served no practical purpose, yet these patterns somehow led to advances in mathematics and science. For the first time in billions of years, the Overmind felt something new: uncertainty. It watched children playing, making up rules to games that made no sense, yet these same children grew up to solve complex problems in ways that defied the Overmind's logical predictions. It observed humans deliberately breaking established patterns just to see what would happen. This requires closer study, the Overmind decided. In all its vast history of observing life, it had never encountered a species that routinely ignored the obvious path in favor of creating new ones. These humans seemed to delight in doing things the hard way, the wrong way, the impossible way, and somehow making it work. The Overmind, which had always taken pride in knowing everything about everything, found itself facing a troubling thought. Perhaps it didn't know as much as it thought it did. I must understand this anomaly, it decided. For the first time in eons, the Overmind prepared to do more than just observe. It would need to interact with these humans directly. It began preparing a probe, a physical form that could make contact with Earth. As the probe took shape, the Overmind felt something else new: anticipation. These humans, these chaotic, illogical beings, had done something no other species had managed in billions of years. They had surprised the Overmind. The probe launched, heading toward Earth. The Overmind was certain that direct contact would help it understand and categorize these humans properly. After all, it had never failed to understand a species before. It had no way of knowing that its certainty was about to be shaken to its very core. The Overmind's probe arrived on Earth on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, landing precisely in the middle of the largest physics research facility in North America. It had chosen this location expecting to find the planet's most logical and orderly minds. The probe, a perfect sphere of shifting silver metal, hovered 5 feet above the ground, waiting for the inevitable response of awe and reverence it had witnessed 47,293 times before. Dr. James Miller was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when the alarms went off. He rushed outside with the rest of the research team, coffee cup still in hand. The sight of the floating sphere made him spill hot coffee on his worn lab coat, but he hardly noticed. "Someone get the spectrometer," he shouted, his eyes never leaving the probe. "And where's that new quantum scanner?" The Overmind observed in confusion. This wasn't the expected response. By its calculations, the humans should have either run in terror or fallen to their knees in worship. Instead, they were running around with scientific equipment, pointing devices at its probe, and arguing excitedly about measurement methods. "Look at these readings," Dr. Linda Parks said, frowning at her tablet. "This thing's breaking half the laws of physics just by floating there." She walked right up to the probe, completely ignoring the security team trying to hold her back, and held up her scanner. "The energy signature is unlike anything we've ever seen." The Overmind decided to initiate standard contact protocol. The probe's surface rippled, and words appeared in the planet's most common languages. IAMTAEOVAORM. INTD. IHVCOMM to observe, and EVALUAT your species. "Fascinating," Dr. Miller said, adjusting his glasses. "It's using some kind of programmable matter for communication. Hey, can anyone get a sample of that surface?" The Overmind was puzzled. In all its vast experience, no species had ever responded to first contact by trying to take its probe apart. It tried again. "I possess the knowledge of a billion civilizations." "Only a billion," Dr. Parks muttered, tapping on her tablet. "Seems like a relatively small dataset considering the size of the observable universe." "Hey, Jim, are you getting these quantum fluctuations?" The security team had given up trying to maintain a perimeter as more scientists poured out of the building. Someone had set up a coffee station nearby, and a group of physicists was having a heated debate about the probe's propulsion system while dunking cookies in their coffee. The Overmind, for the first time in its existence, felt something close to frustration. It had expected fear, worship, or at least proper respect. Instead, these humans were treating its magnificent probe like a particularly interesting lab specimen. "Your species will be tested," the probe displayed, trying to regain control of the situation. "Excellent," Dr. Miller responded, pulling out a notebook. "Will this be a double-blind study? We should probably set up a control group. Linda, can you start documenting the testing parameters?" A young researcher named Mike raised his hand like a student in class. Should we form a peer review committee for this?" The Overmind watched in growing bewilderment as the humans began organizing themselves not as subjects of its test, but as fellow researchers conducting an experiment. They were setting up equipment in a circle around the probe, establishing data collection protocols, and someone had already started a spreadsheet titled Alien Probe Observation Log. "I think it's trying to communicate again," Dr. Park said as new words appeared on the probe's surface. "Could someone get the linguistics department up here? And maybe psychology too. We should probably establish a baseline for alien intelligence assessment." The Overmind had never encountered anything like this. These humans weren't afraid, weren't in awe, and weren't even properly impressed. They were curious. Methodically, systematically curious, but with a chaotic energy that defied all the Overmind's expectations. As the day turned to evening, the area around the probe had transformed into an impromptu research station. Scientists worked under hastily erected floodlights, 3 different departments were arguing about research jurisdiction, and someone had ordered pizza for everyone. The Overmind, watching through its probe, made a decision. Clearly, its standard protocols wouldn't work here. For the first time in its existence, it would need to create a new approach. These humans were going to require special handling. The Overmind had spent a week watching humans study its probe, and it had finally had enough. If these humans wanted to conduct experiments, then it would give them a real test. The probe's surface suddenly lit up with complex mathematical equations, physics problems that had stumped civilizations millions of years more advanced than Earth. "Look at this," Dr. Anna West called out to her colleagues as the symbols appeared. She had been leading the research team since the probe's arrival, getting by on coffee and determination. "It's giving us some kind of test." The Overmind felt satisfied. These equations had taken other species centuries to solve. Surely now the humans would understand their place in the cosmic hierarchy. It watched as Dr. West and her team stared at the glowing symbols. "Mike, get these equations photographed and sent to every major research center," she ordered. "And someone wake up the mathematics department." Within hours, the equations had spread across the globe. Scientists everywhere began working on them. The Overmind observed with interest as humans approached the problems in completely unexpected ways. In India, a mathematician solved one equation while half asleep, claiming the answer came to him in a dream. In Brazil, a team used computer gaming software to visualize the problem in 3 dimensions. A group of high school students in Japan found a solution by relating it to their favorite anime plot. The Overmind was stunned. These humans weren't just solving the equations, they were finding solutions that had never existed before. Where other species had followed logical paths to single answers, humans found multiple ways to reach the same result. "Look at this," Dr. West said, pointing to her tablet. "If we combine the gaming team's visual model with the dream solution, we get something completely new." She paused, then smiled. "I think it's showing us how to bend space." The Overmind decided to increase the difficulty. It displayed problems that had destroyed entire civilizations, paradoxes that had driven species mad. Surely these would prove too much for this young race. But the humans did something unprecedented. Instead of trying to solve the paradoxes, they began playing with them. A writer turned one into a children's story. A musician converted the mathematical patterns into a symphony. A painter created artwork based on the impossible shapes. And somehow, through this chaos of creativity, solutions emerge. "It's like a puzzle," said Dr. West, her eyes bright with excitement, despite her exhaustion. "But the pieces aren't just logical, they're emotional, artistic, intuitive. We need to stop thinking like machines and start thinking like, well, humans." The Overmind watched as humans approached its tests with methods that defied all logic. They made jokes about the problems, turned them into games, and even solved some of them by accident while trying to do something else entirely. A janitor, looking at one of the equations while mopping the floor, suggested a solution because the pattern reminded him of his favorite fishing spot. His casual observation led to a breakthrough in quantum physics. The Overmind had never seen anything like it. These humans weren't just solving the problems, they were having fun doing it. They treated the universe's greatest mysteries like toys to be played with, puzzles to be enjoyed. "I think I know what it's doing," Dr. West said one evening, looking up at the probe. "It's not just testing our intelligence, it's testing how we think." She took a sip of her cold coffee and smiled. "And I don't think it expected us to think quite like this." The Overmind had to agree. In all its billions of years of existence, it had never encountered a species that treated cosmic mysteries with such casual creativity. These humans didn't solve problems the way they were supposed to. They found new ways, impossible ways, ridiculous ways that somehow worked. For the first time, the Overmind began to wonder if perhaps it had something to learn from these chaotic, creative beings. Perhaps knowing everything wasn't the same as understanding everything. But it wasn't ready to admit that. Not yet. It still had more tests to give. The probe's surface began to glow again, preparing to display an even greater challenge. After a month of watching humans solve its supposedly impossible tests, the Overmind decided to force a decision. The probe's surface darkened to a deep blue, and its message appeared in sharp, clear letters. Humanity is two choices. Su beganite to Overmind guidance, or FAC cosmic isolation. Dr. West stood before the probe, dark circles under her eyes from weeks of minimal sleep. Around her, the research facility had grown into a small city of scientists, with temporary buildings and research stations spreading out in all directions. "Those aren't very good choices," she said, crossing her arms. "I think we'd like to suggest a third option." The Overmind paused. In its billions of years of existence, no species had ever rejected its ultimatum. The probe's surface rippled with confusion. "There is no third option," it displayed. "There's always another option," Dr. Miller said, joining Dr. West. "That's kind of our thing. We're proposing a partnership." The Overmind's confusion grew stronger. The probe began to pulse with a soft light as it processed this unexpected response. "Partnership is not possible. Overmind guides. Species follow." Dr. West smiled. "See, that's where you're wrong. We've been studying your responses just as much as you've been studying us. You know everything about how the universe works, but you don't understand why it works that way. We might not have your knowledge, but we have something you don't: imagination." The probe's surface swirled with patterns as the Overmind considered this. It had never encountered a species that dared to suggest it was lacking in any way. Overmind it is observed for billions of years. What could humanity teach? How about the joy of discovery? Dr. Miller suggested. "We've noticed you never ask why about anything. You know all the answers, but you don't seem to enjoy finding them." Around the probe, other scientists began to speak up. Each one offered examples of human approaches that had surprised the Overmind over the past month. The accidental discoveries, the innovative solutions, the completely unexpected ways of looking at old problems. "Your methods are chaotic, inefficient, illogical," the probe displayed. "Yes," Dr. West agreed. "And that's exactly why they work. We've solved problems your way, and we've solved them our way. But imagine what we could accomplish together." The Overmind fell silent. Its probe hovered motionless as it processed this suggestion. Never, in all its vast existence, had it considered the possibility that its perfect knowledge might be improved by chaos and imagination. "Explain partnership concept," the probe finally displayed. Dr. West stepped forward. "Simple. You share your knowledge, we share our creativity. You show us what you know, we show you new ways to look at it. Together, we could understand the universe in ways neither of us could alone." The probe's surface began to ripple more intensely. The Overmind was experiencing something entirely new: uncertainty about its own superiority. "Why is you Overmind truest human judgment?" "Because we're not asking you to trust our judgment," Dr. Miller said. "We're asking you to work with us to find new kinds of judgment, better ones that neither of us have thought of yet." The Overmind considered this. It had spent billions of years collecting knowledge, but these humans had shown it something new: the possibility that knowing everything wasn't the same as understanding everything. "Partnership concept requires FURTKR study," the probe displayed. "Take all the time you need," Dr. West said with a smile. "We'll be here, doing what we do best, finding new ways to surprise you." The Overmind, for the first time in its existence, found itself facing a genuine choice. It could maintain its position of absolute authority, or it could explore this unprecedented possibility of true partnership with a species that consistently defied its expectations. As the probe hovered silently, the humans around it did something that, once again, the Overmind didn't expect. They went back to work, continuing their research, making their discoveries, and waiting patiently for the Overmind to make its decision. They were teaching it something new even now. Sometimes, the most powerful response is simply to wait and see what happens next. The Overmind had accepted the partnership proposal, and now it faced something entirely new, being the student. Through its probe, it watched Professor Tom Baker's unorthodox demonstration with growing fascination. "You see," Tom said, holding up a paper airplane, "sometimes the best way to understand something is to play with it." He launched the plane across the laboratory, and it swooped in graceful arcs. "We didn't discover aerodynamics by pure mathematics. We discovered it by fooling around with paper and dreams of flight." The probe's surface rippled with confusion. Inefficient mathematical calculations should be first. "But that's exactly what I'm trying to show you," Tom said, picking up the plane. "Humans rarely do things in the most efficient order. We stumble, we play, we make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes lead to our greatest discoveries." The Overmind watched as Tom gathered a group of children from the research facility's daycare center. He showed them how to make paper airplanes, and soon the lab was filled with flying paper and laughing children. "What is pure POCOFDSCAS?" the probe displayed. "Watch carefully," Tom said. "See how each child folds their plane slightly differently. See how they learn from each failed flight. They're doing intuitive aerodynamics research without even knowing it." One child's plane did something unexpected. Instead of flying straight, it looped in perfect circles. The Overmind observed as Tom and several scientists rushed to examine the plane's unique fold pattern. "That right there," Tom said, pointing to the accidental discovery. "That's how humans often make breakthroughs. Not through perfect planning, but through happy accidents and the wisdom to recognize them." Over the next few weeks, the Overmind learned more about human imagination and creativity. It watched artists interpret scientific data through paintings, musicians convert mathematical sequences into songs, and poets write about quantum mechanics. "Your species combines unrelated concepts," the probe noted one day. "Exactly," Dr. West replied. "That's what imagination is. It's seeing connections where none existed before. It's looking at a problem and thinking, what if we tried something completely ridiculous?" The Overmind began to understand something new. While it had perfect knowledge of every scientific principle, every mathematical formula, every physical law, it had never considered that there might be value in approaching these things playfully, irrationally, emotionally. During one experiment, a researcher named Jack was explaining a complex physics problem to his young daughter using her toy blocks. His simplified explanation gave another scientist an idea that solved a quantum computing challenge the Overmind had thought impossible. "Humans create order from chaos," the probe displayed. "And sometimes we create useful chaos from too much order," Tom replied. "That's what you've been missing. The universe isn't just about knowing things, it's about wondering about things." The Overmind watched as humans consistently broke its understanding of how intelligence should work. They solved problems in their sleep, got ideas while taking showers, and made breakthrough discoveries while daydreaming. One day, the probe displayed, "Overmind, the experiencing any new sensation." "What's that?" Tom asked. "Unencyertying, POCIDILITY. Wonder." The scientists in the room smiled. The Overmind, the being that knew everything, was finally learning how to not know things, and to enjoy that state of not knowing. "That feeling," Dr. West said, "that's what drives human progress. We don't just want to know things. We want to discover them, to be surprised by them, to wonder about them. The Overmind's probe began to glow with a new kind of light. For the first time in its billions of years of existence, it wasn't just observing and categorizing. It was experiencing the joy of uncertainty, the thrill of new possibilities. Overmind requestes memorialisasonance in human thinking, the probe displayed. Tom picked up another piece of paper, smiling as he began to fold it. Well then, let's start with another paper airplane. But this time, try to fold it without knowing exactly how it will fly. Let's experiment together. The Overmind was learning that sometimes not knowing everything was the first step to understanding something new. The probe's surface turned blood red one morning, startling the research team. Urgent messages flashed across its surface. Critical situation DTKTED. Approaching cosmic anomaly. No gnomon SOLUTON in database. Dr. Mary Thompson, the lead engineer, rushed to the main console as data streamed in. The Overmind was detecting a massive gravitational distortion heading toward Earth's solar system, something that defied its billions of years of knowledge. "How long do we have?" she asked, her fingers flying over the keyboard. 30 CV in Earth days until ATNAPACT. Anomaly will destroy all planetary bodies in system. The research facility erupted into action. Scientists from every department gathered as the probe projected detailed information about the approaching threat. The Overmind had encountered similar phenomena only twice before in its existence, and both times, the affected solar systems had been completely destroyed. Overmind has analyzed alpigosesibles no one will succeed. All logical solutions, you mean, Dr. Thompson said, studying the data. But what about illogical ones? The probe's surface rippled with confusion. Explain. You've been learning about human creativity, she continued. Let us approach this our way, the crazy way. The Overmind watched as Dr. Thompson gathered an unusual team. Along with physicists and astronomers, she called in artists, musicians, children, and even a chef who liked to experiment with molecular gastronomy. These individuals lack scientific expertise, the probe displayed. Exactly, Dr. Thompson smiled. They'll think about it differently. Remember what you've learned about human innovation. The team worked in ways that made the Overmind's calculations stutter. The chef suggested treating the gravitational anomaly like an emulsion that needed to be broken up. A 12-year-old wondered if they could tickle the anomaly to make it laugh and go away. A musician proposed using harmonic frequencies to disrupt its pattern. These ideas are absurd, Dr. West said, but what if we combine them with the Overmind's knowledge? Days passed as they worked. The Overmind provided data, and humans twisted it into shapes it had never imagined possible. They broke rules that the Overmind thought were unbreakable. They suggested solutions that shouldn't work, but somehow pointed toward ones that might. Look here, Dr. Thompson said on the 25th day, pointing to a simulation. If we take the chef's emulsion idea and apply it to gravitational fields, and then add the musician's harmonic theory, the Overmind's calculations suddenly shifted. PRBABILITY 0.01%. That's better than zero, Dr. Thompson said. And humans have beaten worse odds. The solution they developed was bizarre by any standard. It involved using Earth's magnetic field like a whisk, the Moon's gravity like a tuning fork, and Jupiter's mass like a counterweight. It broke 17 laws of physics that the Overmind knew, but in ways that just might work. Risk of FAILUR 99%. Yes, Dr. Thompson agreed, but that's not the important number. The important number is that it's not 100%. And sometimes, that tiny difference is all humans need. The The Overmind had a choice to make. It could rely on its vast knowledge, which said this plan would fail, or it could trust in human imagination, which had repeatedly shown it new possibilities. Overmind with human plan. The next 12 days were a blur of activity as humans and the Overmind worked together. They built impossible devices, wrote physics-defying programs, and prepared to attempt something that had never been done before. As the anomaly approached, Dr. Thompson looked up at the probe, ready to try something crazy. The probe's surface shimmered with what almost looked like excitement. Overmind is ready to improvise. Together, they launched their impossible solution toward the approaching threat. The Overmind provided precise calculations, while humans made split-second adjustments based on instinct and intuition. For the first time in its existence, the Overmind wasn't just observing or knowing. It was hoping. And as their crazy plan sprang into action, it discovered something else new, the thrill of attempting the impossible. The fate of the solar system now hung on whether the combination of perfect knowledge and human creativity would be enough to save it. Their impossible plan had worked. The gravitational anomaly had been dispersed through a combination of the Overmind's precise calculations and humanity's creative solutions. But that success had changed everything, especially the Overmind itself. The probe's surface now displayed shifting patterns of light that the scientists had learned to recognize as excitement. Overmind, hey, it is evolved, it announced one morning. How so? Dr. West asked, sipping her ever-present coffee. Knowledge without creativity is incomplete. Creativity without knowledge is chaos. Overmind. Now, you understand this balance. The research facility had become a permanent installation, with scientists from around the world working alongside the Overmind. But the nature of their work had changed. Instead of the Overmind testing humans or humans studying the Overmind, they were creating something entirely new together. Look at this, Dr. Thompson said, pointing to a new set of equations floating on the probe's surface. It's combining our wild theories with its precise calculations. These aren't just formulas. They're more like poetry written in mathematics. The Overmind had learned to embrace uncertainty, to find joy in exploration rather than just cataloging knowledge. At the same time, humans had learned to better structure their creative chaos, to guide their imagination with the Overmind's vast experience. Requesting proision to share in new discovery, the probe displayed. Of course, Dr. Miller said. What have you found? Not found. Imagined. The scientists watched in amazement as the probe projected a new theory of universe creation, one that combined the Overmind's billions of years of observations with human intuition about patterns and possibilities. It was neither purely logical nor purely creative, but a beautiful fusion of both. You're learning to dream, Dr. West said softly. Humans are learning to calculate, the probe responded. Together, we'd be more. The partnership had grown beyond Earth. Other civilizations across the galaxy watched in fascination as the Overmind, which had once only observed and judged, began sharing stories of human creativity. Meanwhile, humanity's understanding of the cosmos expanded exponentially, guided by the Overmind's knowledge. One day, a young researcher named Ben asked the probe, "Do you regret choosing to work with us instead of just studying us?" The probe's surface rippled with what the humans now recognized as laughter. Regret is illogical. But if regret were illogical, an answer would still be no. The Overmind had discovered that knowing everything wasn't the same as understanding everything. Through its partnership with humanity, it had learned to question, to wonder, to imagine. Its vast knowledge had become a canvas for human creativity, while human innovation was now guided by cosmic wisdom. Propose any UV project, the probe displayed. Exploration of impossible possibilities. Isn't that a contradiction? Dr. Thompson asked with a smile. Precisely. Humans TECHOVERMIND often contain truth. Together, they began working on things that neither humans nor the Overmind could have conceived alone. They explored the space between knowledge and imagination, the intersection of logic and dreams, the point where certainty met wonder. The universe watched as this unique partnership flourished. Other civilizations began to approach problems differently, inspired by the sight of the all-knowing Overmind learning to play with ideas like a child with toys, while humans learned to structure their chaos into cosmic understanding. "We've both changed," Dr. West said to the probe one evening, as they watched a sunset together, something the Overmind had seen billions of times but was only now learning to appreciate. "Change is evolution," the probe responded. "Overmind now knows AAT knowing is not enough. Must also wander, must also DREM." And so, the being that had once thought it knew everything continued to learn, guided by the species that had taught it the value of not knowing. Meanwhile, humanity reached for the stars with greater wisdom, their dreams now guided by cosmic knowledge. Together, they had created something entirely new, a way of understanding the universe that combined the best of both their natures. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't always logical, but it was alive with possibilities that neither had imagined before. The Overmind had finally learned the greatest lesson of all, the joy of discovering that there was always more to discover.